Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nazir Daf Hey. We begin on the bottom of Daf Dal Mebeis, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara continues the discussion of our previous Mishnah. We had mentioned that there's something called the Nazir Olam and there's something called the Nazir Shimshon. They're both eternal Nazirim, so the Mishnah wanted to know Ma Bein Nazir Olam and Nazir Shimshon, and the Mishnah described certain halachic differences between them. And the Gemara continues discussing where do we know the source of the Nazir Olam regarding some of the halachic parameters that it has. Everyone is joining for today's daf. Something to discuss in today's daf are the sources for Nazir Shimshon, that mutal tameh b'meis, that he's allowed to make himself tameh with a dead person, as we had concluded on the previous daf. It was gemor gmirila, that he killed them and then he stripped them. And Nazir Olam, that hichbit sari make a batar, that when his hair gets too heavy, he can make it lighter with a razor. We bring a machlokes regarding shiur kovid. What is the halachic measurement of when the hair is too heavy from a Nazir Olam that he's allowed to go and cut his hair? How often is that? We also have a discussion regarding the halach of stam naziris lamed yom. The next Mishnah says that the generic naziris, if you say I realize naziris for 30 days, we actually have a machlokes Rav Masna bar Pada, where the midaraisa stam naziris completes after 30 days or actually after 29 days. Although we all think, we presume the way it says in the Torah is 30 days. Actually, machlokes in the Gemara if it's 30 or 29 days. We also have machlokes that comes out regarding miktsayim kekulai. Do we say that partial completion of a day is like you did the whole day, and there's going to be relevance regarding the beginning of the 30 days, when you start in the middle of a day, the end of it, how it implies to, let's say, consecutive naziris? Could you do even doubling up of miktsayim kekulai? Also, what comes out is the Gemara discusses Nazir Asabayayin, that even if, let's say, you'll say mitzvah kekula, but Nazir is forbidden to partake of wine, and tuma ad la'achar takalachas v'avaz karbanaisim, which that's going to be a significant variable in regards to defining why we would say certain amounts of days, even if, let's say, it's 29, we'll say, let's say 30, because the next day, when you have the takalachas and bring the karbanas, that's also considered as part of your prohibition, because you can't have the wine and become tameh until you actually did your completing services. So begin the current daf, Daf Dal Mebeis, 4 lines up at the bottom of the Amud. In the previous daf, we had mentioned the Mishnah, what's the difference between Nazir Olam and Nazir Shimshon. And the Mishnah said many differences between the two of them. And we had said, Nazir Shimshon is mutal tameh b'meis. That was the last thing we said, that gemor gemirila, it's halacha mech mesinai, that the Nazir Shimshon is allowed to make himself tameh, like we see Shimshon Agiber, he killed those Philistines and he made himself tameh by stripping them. And that's how Gemara continues regarding Nazir Olam. That we said, we said in the Mishnah, if his hair gets too heavy, he can lighten it. Although he's going to be Nazir for the rest of his life, but he could his hair is going to grow and grow and grow, he could lighten it. So that's where our Gemara begins. Nazir Olam heicha ksiv. Where does it mention the Nazir Olam? The Torah explains, it doesn't mean where does it say Nazir Olam in the Torah. It means how do we know that it's permitted for him to lighten the load of his hair? And that's what the Gemara is going to bring from Avshalim, who he lightened the load of his hair, although he was a Nazir Olam. Each opinion according to what he says. As the Gemara says, the time like learn the Brayso. Rebbe says, Avshalim, the son of David HaMelech, Nazir Olam Haya, he was an eternal Nazir. Shnemak says the pasuk in Shmuel Beis, Vahim Beketz Arba'am Shana, was at the end of 40 years, Vayoyim Avshalim El HaMelech, and Avshalom said to the king, Il Chano Avshalom is Nidrai Asher Nadarti LaHashem Bechevron. I'm going to go help and pay up my vow, which I took a vow in Chevron. So, where do you say anything over here about Nazir? As the Tais explains, that Stam Neder, a person takes, is Mashma Naziris. Moreover, that since he only cut his hair, as the pasuk is going to tell us in the moment, we're going to quote, Miyamim leyamim, so that would sound like because his hair would get heavy, and that's why he would be cutting it, sounds like that he was a Nazir. So those are two indicating factors to tell us that this neder that Avshalom had taken was Naziris. Okay, so we know he took a neder of Naziris, and he was a Nazir Olam, and how do we know this? Because the pasuk tells us, Megalech echad l'shnei masach. Once every 12 months, he was cutting his hair. How do we see this? And this is the machlokes. This is the first opinion in how often could a Nazir Olam cut his hair. Shnemak says a pasuk over there. It says, and the Ger says, "V'haya miketz yomim la yomim." That it was at the end of. It says that the pasuk there says in Shmuel Beis that when he cut his head, meaning he cut his hair on his head, and it was the end of days to days. Ashi galech did he cut his hair, and the pasuk says ki chaved olav because his hair was too heavy. So so he cut it off. He took the hair of his head, and which was 200 shkolim in the stones of the king. But this is what it says. It says he cut it from yamim layamim. Says the Gemara continues top of Hamad Aleph. Now yamim mibati arichayma. We learn out the word yamim that it says over here from the words yamim that it says by the house of the walled cities, which Mahasam, just like over there, the halacha is Yod Beis Chaydish. The halacha is that you could go ahead and redeem the house of the walled city only up until 12 months. And it says the word Yamim. Oh, Afkan, Yod Beis Chaydish. Here also when it says he cut his hair, Yamim, it's also he cut it once every 12 months. So that's the first opinion that you see that the halacha is, says Rebbe, you could cut your hair only once in every 12 months as a Nazir Eilam. That's one pshat. He says, no, you could cut your hair, and that's what Avshalom did, once every 30 days. Rabbi Yosi, a third opinion, he says, we cut his hair from Friday to Friday. That we find by princes, which what Avshalom was, that they cut the hair from Friday to Friday. So now the Gemara goes through to explain the sources of each one of these opinions. My time of the Rebbe, what's the reason of Rebbe that he says that it's once every 12 months? So says the Gemara, because like we said, he learns it out from the house of the walled city where it says over there Yamim, it says over here Yamim, just like over there 12 months, so to over here. But the Gemara asks, but Rebbe himself is the one who is quoted as saying that Ein Yamim Pechusim Mishnayim. That when you say the word Yamim, it's not less than two. What is going on is expounding when it says in the pasuk by the Batei Arechem, it says Yamim Tia Gulasai, that days will be his redemption, which is that the halacha is that a seller cannot redeem something that he sold less than a period of 2 days. So wait a second. So here also, maybe it should be that every 2 days the Nazir can lighten the load of his hair. How do you know it's 12 months? Says the Gemara, Hai Gezerah Shava, that you're learning out the word Yamim by the Avshalom, by the Nazir Olam, from the Batei Arechem, from the house that was sold in the walled city, Mishum Kovid Gama. Why? What are we learning it out for? Because of the heaviness. Because, as the Mefarish explains, by Avshalom, the pasuk had said, why was he cutting his hair miyamim liyamim? Because kichavid alav v'gilche, because his hair was too heavy, so he's cutting it. Says the Gemara, you can't tell me that the yamim should learn that from yamim tigulasai of 2 days, because the b'shnei yam like a kaivid. In 2 days, there's no heaviness of the hair. So that's not something that you could be possibly learning out. So it wouldn't make sense that you can learn the Gzer Shava on that. Rather, it's from the understanding, as it says in the pasuk, what does Yama mean? Shana Tiegulasai, the pasuk says. For a year you could redeem it. Which, yes, after 2 days, the whole year, like it says after that, if you don't redeem it until it fills up Shana Tibima. So obviously, it's the whole year that you can redeem it. That's what the word Yama would be telling us. Not the other part of the halacha, that you have to wait 2 days to redeem it, but that you have a whole year to redeem it. Because it wouldn't make sense to learn the Gzer Shava going on 2 days, because there's no heaviness of the hair. If you didn't cut your hair in 2 days, it must be going on the year thing. Oh, that makes sense. That obviously you didn't cut your hair in a year. That's going to get pretty heavy. Okay, fine. That's your source. That you're showing that it says Yamim over there and here, and that's once every 12 months. But the Gemara asked, but Be'ema Beishanim, maybe say that you can only cut your hair once every 2 years, because the Chesed can bring you a different pasuk. It says in Bereishis, Vayihimikate Shanasayim Yamim. It was the end of 2 years of days. So you see, it says Yamim by Shanasayim, but the 2 years, maybe once every 2 years. It says the Gemara, no, Dan and Yamim She'enim Amshanim. We're going to learn that when it references the word days without the word years, Miyamim She'enim Amshanim. From another time that it says days without referencing years. But Batei Arechem, it says just the word Yamim, Tiegulasai. Here also by Avshalom, by the Nazir Eilam, also says only the word Yamim. Don't prove this one from Shnasayim Yamim, She'eshim Shanim. It doesn't say just the purest terminology of Yamim, it says also the word Shanim with it. So that's an added variable that you don't have by the case of Avshalom, and therefore we wouldn't learn that out from it. Okay, says the Gemara, maybe say that it's every 30 days, because the pasuk says midbar ad chaydish yamim, until a month of days. So you see that yamim can mean a month. Says the Gemara, no, same type of an answer. Done in yamim she'ein mem chadashim. We can learn that where it references the term days without months, which is what it says by Avshalom. Mi yam she'ein mem chadashim, from a term when it says days without months, which is that by Batei Arechem. Vayich zen. Don't prove from this pasuk sheyeshi mei chadashim, where it doesn't just say the purest word of yam. It says the word chaydish with it. And therefore, we're not going to learn that from that. Okay, but the Gemara says, Ve'im mahacha. Maybe you learn that from this pasuk in Sefer Shoftim. The pasuk there says, Miyamim yamima v'goymer, where it says that Telachna, that the Jewish girls would go, Lesanais, they would go to lament to the daughter of Yiftach HaGiladi. It says over there, Arbas yamim bashana, that 4 days in the year. So it sounds like over there, if they went 4 days a year, do basic math, 12 months divided by 4, comes out that every 3 months they were going to see the daughter of Yiftach HaGiladi. So maybe Yomim, like you see the words was Yomim Yamima means once every 3 months. Says the Gemara, no. Danin Yomim Miyamim, which is exactly the words. Vein Danin Yomim Miyamima. It's not exactly the word Yomim. So we're not going to learn out from Yiftach HaGiladi's daughter. But says the Gemara, wait a second, my nafkamina, what's the difference that it's off by Yomim, Yamima? It's the same thing. Because Vatan Rabbi Shmuel, which is quoted many times in Shas, we learned in the Brisa of Yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel, and you just want to take a look, you see by the Maseres Shas, Erev and Makkes, Chul, and Yavamis, Nida, Yuma, Hariyas, Menachas, Bechayra, you just take a look how many times this is mentioned in Shas. We bring this many times. What does the Brisa of Yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel say? It says by the Mitzayra, by the Tzaras on the house, that the Nega, it says in 2 different places there, because there's different stages, the first week, the second week, the third week, whatever it is. But the point is, it says, V'shav HaKoin, the Koin will return, and it says, Uvah HaKoin, the Koin will come, which actually, the Ba is actually later than the V'shav. But the Bryce Shibishwal says, Zuhi Shiva, Zuhi Bia. This coming back is the same as coming. In other words, that just like coming, that when it says Uvah HaKoin, it means you got to take off the stones, and you got to scrape away the cement, and you got to give it a week. So when it says coming back, you got to scrape it off, you got to give it a week, even though the words are not exactly, but the translation is basically the same. You read the Art Scroll, it would say the same English translation, even though the Hebrew is a little bit different. So therefore, it's going to have the same halacha. So wait a second, you tell me one says Yom and one says Yamima, and if you're not learning out, when it says V'shav U and the Va, you tell me it's the same thing to learn it out? Says the Gemara, yeah, when did we say that you're going to learn out V'shav and from Uva, even though they're different words, because they mean the same thing, as Heicha Deleka de Damile. That's when there's nothing more similar to that. But if there's something more similar to that, you'll learn that from that, which is more similar. So, if let's say, your wife tells you to get green peppers, if there's green, you're not going to get the red, even though she says it's only the vegetable in the store is a cucumber, you'll get some vegetable. But so I'm saying, if it's somewhat similar and there's nothing else, we'll learn that from that. But if there's something more similar, more precise, we learn like Zer Shavim, where it says the exact word of Yavim. Now, Ikar Da'amri, that those that say that no, I'll tell you the pshat why we don't learn now. It's from the pasuk of the daughter of Yiftach HaGiladi. The first pshat we gave was because not exactly the same word. Second pshat the Gemara says is, no, Menoya Dinan, from where do we know that you're going to divide the year equally? You were assuming that it says in the year they went 4 times in the year. So you did basic math and you divided 12 by 4 and you said, once every 3 months. So you asked me, you said, maybe when it says by Avshalom that Yomim he would cut his hair, it means once every 3 months. Who said the Chol Tlasa Yarchin Chad Zimna? Who said that every 3 months you would go 1 time? Dilma Arba Zimna B'Shata. Maybe the 4 times in the year. And the Ger says Hoya was Arba Yarchin. Maybe after 4 months was Chad Zimna 1 time. Then Train Yarchin in 2 months was B'Chad Zimna was 1 time. So since it's possible that it wasn't equally divided once every 3 months, you could have gone 4 months once and then waited 2 months and gone on, and then that's how you get to 6 months. Doesn't mean that you went equally. So you don't know exactly, learn out from here exactly a precise number, and therefore it wouldn't make sense to learn out from it, and therefore rather we would learn out from Bati Archaima. That was another answer why we don't learn out from there. Okay, so that was the opinion of Rebbe, that how he knows that the Nazir Olam cuts his hair once every 12 months. The next opinion we mentioned was Reb Narai Omer. He had said, Megalech achas l'shleishim. You cut your hair once every 30 days. Says the Gemara, the Gemara explains, it's not really asking, it's explaining. My time, Gabi Kahanim, what's the reason why by Kahanim? That the halacha is that once every 30 days they have to cut their hair because of the heaviness of the hair. Hochinami, that's the pshat. Why over here, ikukayvid? There's also the heaviness, as it actually says there in the pasuk by Avshalom, because there was the heaviness of the hair. So therefore, that's why we cut it once every 30 days. Now, Taisa wants to know, wait a second. Kahanim themselves, that they cut it once every 30 days, the Gemara in Tainus Daf Zayin learns it out from Stam Nazir, because it says pera, that you lighten it once every 30 days. If that's the case, so why are you learning out the halach of the Nazir Olam? From Kayin, which is learned out from Nazir. You're going a little bit out of the way, learn it straight out from Stam Nazir, 30 days. Which says Taisus, no, it's not logical for this Tana to learn out a Kedushas Olam, an everlasting sanctity of Nazir Olam, from a Kedusha Shah, from a temporary Nazirs of 30 days. So therefore we learn from Kahanim, because although that's called Laman Min Alama, you're learning out from something that's self-learning out, why don't you go straight to the source? No, because Kahuna is Kedushas Olam. So it makes sense to learn the Nazir Olam from Kahuna. Now kahuna, we have Gzeira Shava, Pera Pera, but to learn Nazir Shah, that wouldn't be appropriate learning. The third opinion was Rabbi Yossi Omer. He says, you cut your hair once a week, on Friday. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If Avshalom, who's a Nazir Olam, is cutting his hair once a week, because you told me, like B'nai Malachim, that's what princes do, so then Ma'ika B'nai L'Sha'achai. What exactly was the difference between him and his brothers? He was a prince. So Vos Zogster that he would do it because... So Taisa wants to know, maybe the difference between them was Karbanis. Because what happens is that when the Nazir Olam lightens the load of his hair, he actually brings a carbon. So Vos Frankster, what's the difference was regarding Karbanis? Says Taisa, what the Gemara means to say is, what's the difference between them regarding cutting the hair? Why? Because the pasuk says, it sounds like that his hair cutting was delayed. But was Haksta, it's the same as every prince, which is once a week. So it says the Gemara, interesting to answer. The Gemara says, Yom Tiv Shechali is be'emtza Shabbos. When Yom Tiv is during the week, the Achay Magalchen. The brothers would cut the hair because if he covered Yom Tiv. Hula Megalech. Then he wouldn't cut his hair because he only did it once a week. That was one difference. Another difference is Ligaluchim and Safcha de Mali Shabsa. To cut their hair in the morning of Friday. Achay Magalchen, the brothers would go after Shachris, after learning the Daf, they would go get their hair cut in the barbershop. But Avshalom wasn't able to cut his hair ad panya up until the evening, like the Rosh says, ad havars karbanos, until he brought his karbanos. He had to wait till later in the day, and that would be the difference between him and his brothers. Now, parenthetical, the Gemara wants to know. We quoted the pasuk when we started off. We were describing that it was miketz arbaim shana. The first thing we said when we opened up the daf was. At the end of 40 years, Avshalom said to the king, I'm going to go and I'm going to pay my neder that I took in Hebron, which was that of Nazir's. So the Gemara wants to know, Hani Arbam Shana. This that it says, Vayimikates Mem Shana, Maya Vedetayu, what is it doing? In other words, you cannot say it's 40 years from when his father David became king, that's when Avshalom rebelled, which was why he was going. There was a whole plot and scheme, because David only ruled 40 years. And the pasuk over there sounds like that David HaMelech was still king for 5 years after the story, which had 3 years of famine. He had 1 year that he did the sin of counting the Jewish people, and he had one that he made mishmaros, that he divided the covenant into different mishmaros. So what is this 40 years number from? Not from when his father David was king. So what's this 40 years? So on that says the Gemara, it says, L'kates mem shana sheshalo lohen melech. It was 40 years from when they had requested a king, which that was a merida, that was rebellion against the real king, which is Rabbi Shloimy. Because what are you doing asking for a king? So therefore, the effect of the rebellion of Avshalom was being measured from the Jewish people's rebellion against asking for a flesh and blood king. And Tana, we learned in the Braisa, the year that they actually asked for a king was Hishnas Esla Shmuel Rabasi, was from the 10th year of the rule of Shmuel Hanavi, who was from Ramot. As Taisa explains, that they halfway through the 11th year, they appointed a king, and then Shaul HaMelech was king for half of the 11th year and another 2 years, 2.5 years. So that's really 4 years from when they made the request for a king. In the beginning of the 36th year from when they made from when David HaMelech was king, which is the 40th year from when they made the request, because again, Shaul was like basically those first 4 years, and David HaMelech was 36. And then 36 years after David HaMelech was king, which was 40 years from when they made a request for a king, that's when Avshalom rebelled. And that year was a famine year, and also the 40th year, like we said, from when they made the request. And based on this, says Taisus, actually the rebellion was actually in the beginning of the 40th year from the request, and Slav Daf can be Kates Mem Shana. It wasn't really at the end, it was actually in the beginning. But that's what the number 40 is. Again, we want to go ahead and associate that of when they made a request for a king, because that was a rebellion in the Rebbeinu Shalom. What are you asking for Melech? Over here you have Hashem. So therefore we will be talking about another rebellion against the king with Avshalom to his father David, that was also associated with that number. Now we can look at the next Mishnah of talking about a Kabbalah of Naziris. So it says in the Mishnah that well-known halach of Stam Naziris, a generic Naziris, we can just say Harei Elai Nazir, is Lamed Yom. 30 days. The Gemara can explain how do we know this. As the Gemara says right now, Manan Mili, from where do we know this, that Stam Naziris is 30 days? So Omer Amasna Makra says, the pasuk says in Midbar, Kodesh yiyeh, the Nazir shall be holy. Now, yiyeh is begematria. The numerical value of the word yiyeh is tlosenhave, is 30. Because yud is 10, hey is 5. Double that up with another yud hey is 30. So that's what it means. He's going to have a Nazir for 30 days. That's one shot. He says, if you count all the times in that parsha that mentioned the word Nazir, you're going to come to Lamed Chasar Achas. You're going to come to 30 minus 1, which is 29 times the word Nazir is written there in the parsha. And accordingly to that, Naziris is going to be 29 days. Now, it says Tais, although actually if you count it up, you actually find that it's 30. So why is he saying it's 29? It says Tais is one of the words that it says there, what's called Nazir Elikav al Reishai, that's not counted. Because that word Nazir Elikav al Reishai actually does not refer to the Naziris. It actually refers to the terminology of a crown. As the targum on that word actually is Kalila. So that Nazir, we know can mean crown, that counted towards the number of how many days he has to be in Nazir. So that's the machlekes. Where do we know this source from? Now, the Gemara asks now on each interpretation, and obviously we see that Bar Pada holds that the Naziris is only 29 days, not 30, because there's 29 times that mentions the word Nazir. But says the Gemara, Masna Nami, Nelef min Nazir Nizre. Why doesn't he learn out from the amount of time it says Nazir? Because like the Rush explains, it would be logical that to say that why does it say so many times the word Nazir is to darshan the, why more than just darshaning a word of its numerical value, it would make sense to count up how many times it says it. So Amalacha, would tell you, no, who that, meaning all the times that it mentions the word Nazir in the Torah, is l'drasha, is actually for exposition. So if it's there for drashas, you can't combine it for the counting of like, it's extra to tell you how many days he's going to be a Nazir to say it's 29 days, because all the times it says, it's telling me a drasha. As the Gemara says, what does that mean? So the Gemara says, for example, the pasuk that says, Miyayin v'sheicha yazir. It says from wine and from old wine, yazir. So it says the word yazir. That word yazir is not extra, that's to tell me, lesser yayin mitzvah in the reshus. As we said in the previous daf, to say that even mitzvah wine is prohibited, like voluntary wine. And when it says in the Torah, ki yafli linder, when he's going to enunciate to take a vow, neder nazir, he's going to take a vow of naziris, lahazir to make a naziris. It says extra words, nazir, lahazir. That's not extra, that's for drasha. Malama comes to teach us on naziris, chala al naziris, that nazir, lahazir tell you that, yeah, one naziris could take effect on another naziris, which Tais Amid Bey says, most definitely, if a guy would say, hareini nazir, vin nazir, I don't need a pasig to let you know that it's going to be one nazir is going to take effect on another one. Because most definitely, when you finish the first Naziris, you start counting the second Naziris. When you need the pasuk is for when a guy says, Hareini Nazir hayoim vin Nazir, which then we should have said that it would only take effect one Naziris because he said today. Therefore, we need to have an extra pasuk to say that no, even when you say it like that, it's going to be Naziris chala al Naziris. But that's why it doesn't hold like Bar Pada. But a Pada Malach, he would tell you, wait a second. You think lekachad minhoin? You think not one of these 29 times that it says the word Nazir, the lav drasha, that is not for a drasha, which like Tais says meaning whether it be 1 or 10, but not necessarily 1. But you think you have a drasha for every single word of Nazir that it says? That obviously one of them is not for a drasha. So elamidahu leminyana. So Barpada follows through. It says obviously from the fact that one of the 2 or 7 times that it says the words, then they're only there to count. So kulanam leminyana. So they're all there for counting. And like Tais explains, although that some of the words you could darshan, but still, since it's saying so many times the word Nazir, and some of them are not necessary for drasha, so it's obviously there to count them all up, and to tell me how many days you're going to be as a Nazir, which is going to be 29. That's the machlekes between Bar Pada and Rav Masna. But now the Gemara goes through a lengthy, extended discussion regarding this machlekes between the two of them, regarding how to prove like either one of these opinions. So the Gemara asks first from our Mishnah. It's not than our Mishnah, Stam Nazir Shleishim Yoim, a generic Nazir is 30 days. So the Gemara says, wait a second, Bishlam Rav Masna Nicha makes sense because Rav Masna said the Nazir is 30 days. The numerical value of the word year is 30. According to Bapada, that's difficult because it sounds like the Tana is telling you the extent of the biblical Naziris is what he's coming to tell me, which is 30 days. And according to Bapada, a Stam Naziris is 29 days, not 30 days. So Bapad would tell you, no. A very interesting answer, and we're going to get very creative in this Gemara's discussions over here regarding these two different opinions. He says, "Aidi de'ika yom tlosin." Since there's a day 30, the megaleach umevi korbanaisav. Yes, even if you're a nazir, let's say 29 days, what happens when you finish your naziris? The next day is when you could cut your hair off and bring your karbanis. Now, moreover, you're not allowed to drink wine or be metam l'meisim until you bring your karbanis. That's why we said that the naziris is 30 days, because your naziris is going to continue until 30 days, because you cannot bring your karbanis on day 29, even according to Bapada. Yes, your naziris goes only up until 29 days, but then you got to wait till the next day. So since it's going to be on day 30 that you're only able to cut your hair and be metam l'meisim, because that's the only when you can bring your karbanis. So therefore, that's why we say the naziris is 30 days. Okay, good answer. Then the Gemara asks from a Mishnah Tanan on Daf Tezayin Medalf. Mishnah says, Misha Amar Harini Nazir. If someone says, okay, ich bin a Nazir, I'm a Nazir. So the halacha says the Mishnah, he cuts his hair on day 31. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Bishlam Rav Masna, I understand the Rav Masna, that's great, that makes sense. He says the Nazir is 30 days, next day is when you bring your karbanis, and then voila, that's when you're going to cut your hair. Vapada kasha. Vapada, this definitely seems to be difficult, because according to him, you should be cutting your hair on day 30, because you told me the Nazir is done on day 29. So what's this day 31 that he's cutting his hair on? So Amluch Bapada is going to tell you like this. It says, Emer Sefer, look at the end of that Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Im Gilech lo yom shleishim, if you cut your hair on day 30, so Yatza, you filled your obligation. Wait a second. Ela Sefer Misayele. So it comes out, the Sefer is supporting Barpada, because you're cutting your hair on day 30. According to Rav Masni, you can't be cutting your hair on day 30. You didn't finish your Naziris yet. Okay. So then, Reisha is Nasa Ka'oimer Shleim. So then you want to know, the Reisha, how am I going to explain that? Well, what are you doing cutting your hair on day 31? And the words of the Gemara are, Nasa Ka'oimer Shleim. It's as if he said, complete. As Taisa explains. The Reisha that's telling you, Likatchila, what to go ahead and that not to cut your hair only until day 31, is because the words that Taisa says is, he said he wants to be a Nazir a complete 30 days. So it's not possible for him to cut his hair on day 30. Because it's like a case when you said, I want to be a Nazir for a complete 30 days. What does that mean? So he explains, when you say, I want to be a Nazir stam, that likat chila, you shouldn't be cutting your hair only until day 31. Why? Because when you would say, I want to be a Nazir for 30 days, which stam Nazir 29 days is very similar to, and you say, I want to be a complete 30 days, then you cannot cut your hair on day 30. You would have to cut on day 31.
Did you say 31 means at night, 30 at night?
No, on the 31st day, meaning when you when you brought your karbanas, you can only bring karbanas during the daytime. But at B'diyevet, if you cut your hair on day 30, that's what the Sefer says, you feel the obligation, because that's the biblical halacha, because Stam Nazir is supposed to cut his hair on day 30. It's only like a Gzeir D'Rabbanan, because, as if you said, I want to do it a whole 30 days, because 30 is a unit. It's a full number. So really, although Nazir is really 29 days, and you're supposed to cut your hair on day 30, Rabbanan said do it on 31. Because we're going to make it as if you said Shleimim. Because how it sounds like in places, you might confuse the two of them. But the evidence, of course, it's going to be good. Now, but then he says, if you're going to say, why do you have to say it's a Gzeira Atu when you're going to say Shleimim? Why don't you say it's a Gzeira Atu when he says Shleishim Yim without Shleimim? Why do you have to add on the word Shleimim? Because that's how it's obvious shortly from the second question the Gemara asked, that according to Bapada, he doesn't hold Mixtas Yim Kekulai. He doesn't say a partial day is like a whole day. So when you say 30 days, so biblically you'd have to cut your hair on day 31. So why is the Gemara saying the word Shleiman? So it says what you can say is that, you're right, good question. It's only because the Gemara later on is going to answer for Rav Masna, that it's like when you said Shleimim, where there you cannot say it any other way. Because according to Rav Masna, you say Miktazim Kukulai. So the Gemara has to say on his question, Shleimim. So therefore, when we're answering for Bapad, we also use the word Shleim. But it says, you don't really have to say Shleim. That's really unnecessary. Just say that the guy said 30 days, then it would have to be a full 30 days, and you would have to cut your hair on day 31. But really, regular Nazir is only 29 days. So to avoid that confusion, we said, okay, look at Chila, cut your hair on day 31. Okay. But now the Gemara asks, well, Rav Masna. We just asked him about Pada from the Reisha. But now says the Gemara, according to Rav Masna, Kasha Seifa. What does he do with the Seifa? Because the Seifa says that, Reisha said, cut your hair on day 31. Stam Nazirs, day 31. Seifa said, but the Abed, you did on day 30, Yaitse. What do you mean? You're in the middle of your Nazir, so according to Rav Masna, how can you be Yaitse b'di'avad? You got to start all over again. Says the Gemara, no, Ksabi holds a well-known halachic principle of Niktzis hayoim kukulei. Some of the day is like the whole day. Oh, so therefore if you cut your hair on day 30, you were Yaitse, because since some of the day already passed in your Naziros, so therefore, but the Eved is like you did a full 30 days. But of course, like a Tchili, not supposed to cut your hair only until day 31. Now, says Tais according to Pada that it doesn't hold of Miktzim Kukulai. So therefore, even on day 29, if you cut your hair, it sounds like that he's saying that if you would be Yaitse, I'm not sure what he's saying over there, but therefore, I mean, it would sound like because you're saying, unless you're going to the next part of the Gemara, but Pada couldn't say that on day 29 you're going to be Yaitse. That would seemingly be the Psha, because he doesn't hold Miktzim Kukulai. And if you didn't finish your Nazirs, then you didn't finish your Nazirs. According to Rav Masna, day 30 would make sense. I mean, according to everyone, day 30 that you did it during the day would make sense because of Pada doesn't hold the Miktzim Kukulai, and Rav Masna holds, yeah, so therefore, although according to Rav Masna it's supposed to be day 31, it's going to be on day 30. Now, the Gemara has one final question that we're going to quote on this daf. The Gemara says, Tanan, the Mishnah over there says, on Daf Tazayin, if someone says, Arini Nazir Shleishim Yom, I am a Nazir for 30 days. So the Mishnah said, Megilach Yom Lamed, if he cut his hair on day 30, Lo Yatza, he has not fulfilled his obligation. Now, the Girs of Taisis, as some Gemaras point out, has the following words. Bishloima Labar Pada. We understand according to Bar Pada what? That he doesn't hold the Miktzasiyim Kukuloi. Okay. So Nicha, it makes sense. What makes sense? That although previously he said that if you cut your on day 30, you fulfill the obligation. Yeah. The other Tana was saying that because that was going on Stam Naziris, which is really 29 days. Oh, okay. So of course you cut your on day 30, which is really the biblical halacha, you can be Yaitse. But over here where he says 30 days, so that means his Nazir is supposed to extend for 30 days. So, of course, if you cut your on day 30, not fulfilling the obligation, because he doesn't hold the Miktzim Kukulai. But, continues the Girs of Taisis, El Rav Masna Kasha. But according to Masna, that's difficult because although he said 30 days, he holds Miktzim Kukulai. So if you cut your on day 30, why aren't you fulfilling the obligation? It's the same thing as Tam Naziris. According to Masna, you should be Eitzit. Says the Gemara, and this is what we had referenced before, that this word that we have to say for a masna was the word that we used for Pada, but it was lav dafka. Oh, it's ba'aymer shleimim. It's where the guy said a complete 30 days. So although the Mishnah just says unspecific shleishim yom, even so, but lamaisa he said shleishim yom, which is superfluous, because even unspecific according to Rav Masna is always 30 days. So why are you saying nazir shleishim yom? Just saying nazir is always automatically 30 days. So when he says Shleishim Yom, it's as if he's saying a complete 30 days. Complete 30 days. You can't say Miktzim Kukulai, and therefore if you cut you on day 30, therefore you have not fulfilled your obligation. Thank you to any time for hosting us.